pay attention to the man in the blue Ford F-150. The dashboard camera, a small, unobtrusive black Cyclops, records his journey in crisp high definition. It is March 14th, 2022. The time displayed on the screen reads 8:47 p.m. He is driving down County Road 41, a long, dark stretch of pavement that cuts through the sprawling farmlands of rural Ohio. His name is Robert "Rob" Henderson. He is a husband, a father of two, and a man who believes in helping his fellow traveler. He has less than 10 minutes to live. This is not just the story of a good deed punished by death. This is the story of a system that repeatedly ignored the warning signs. It is the story of two predators who honed their craft in plain sight, escalating their cruelty under the indifferent gaze of a justice system that considered them a nuisance, not a threat. This is the story of 47 seconds of audio that would reveal a truth more horrifying than anyone could imagine. Rob Henderson was, by all accounts, an anchor in the lives of those who knew him. At 46 years old, he had built a life not of extraordinary wealth or fame, but of profound decency. He was a master electrician, the kind of tradesman whose number was passed around neighborhoods with a reverence usually reserved for family doctors. If Rob fixed it, it stayed fixed. He was a man of routines. He left for work at sunrise with a thermos of black coffee his wife, Clara, had prepared. He came home with grease on his hands and a story about his day, usually a funny one involving a squirrel in an attic or a client's ridiculous request. His two daughters, Emily and Sophie, were 16 and 14. For them, he was the immovable object of their world. He was the one who taught them how to change a tire, how to bait a hook, and how to stand up for themselves. He was embarrassing at school functions, cheering just a little too loudly at soccer games, but his pride in them was a brilliant, unwavering light. He wasn't a perfect man. He could be stubborn, a trait that made him a formidable electrician, but a frustrating husband during arguments about where to go for dinner. He worried about money, about the future, about the ever-growing complexities of raising two teenage girls in a digital world he barely understood. These were the normal, mundane anxieties of a man deeply invested in his family's well-being. The week of March 14th was a particularly stressful one. A large commercial contract had hit a snag, requiring late nights and frustrating calls with suppliers. On top of that, his oldest daughter, Emily, was struggling in her calculus class, and the tension over grades had created a palpable friction in the house. That Monday evening, Rob had stayed late at a job site 30 miles from home, trying to get ahead of the week's work. He called Clara around 8:30 p.m. She could hear the weariness in his voice. She told him to just come home. Dinner could be reheated. The problems would still be there tomorrow. His last words to her were, "I know. I'm on my way. I love you." He was a good man, tired and heading home to the family that defined his world. He was exactly the kind of person who would stop to help someone in need. He was the perfect victim. Now look at the other car. It is a beat-up, late 90s sedan, a nondescript vehicle of a faded green color, parked awkwardly on the shoulder of County Road 41. Its hazard lights are blinking, a rhythmic pulse of distress in the encroaching darkness. Standing beside the car is a woman. In the periphery of Rob Henderson's headlights, she appears slight, distressed, holding a cell phone to her ear with one hand and waving down his approaching truck with the other. Inside the sedan, sitting in the driver's seat and cloaked in shadow, is a man. These two people are Caleb Thorne and his girlfriend, Brittany Wallace. On paper, they were just another couple struggling on the fringes. Caleb, 29, had a spotty work history, bouncing between construction gigs and stints at fast food restaurants. Brittany, 27, was unemployed, collecting disability for a chronic back issue that seemed to flare up whenever a job opportunity arose. To their neighbors in the low-rent apartment complex where they lived, they were unremarkable. They were quiet, kept to themselves. Music was sometimes played too loud, and arguments could be heard through the thin walls, but it was nothing out of the ordinary. They were just another piece of the worn-out fabric of the neighborhood. But beneath that surface of mundane struggle, a different reality festered. Caleb Thorne was not just a man down on his luck. He was a man who simmered with a deep and abiding rage. He saw the world as a place that had cheated him. Every person with a nicer car, a better job, a happier life was a personal insult. He nurtured a profound sense of entitlement, a belief that he deserved what others had, and that taking it by force was not a crime, but a form of cosmic rebalancing. His juvenile record was a string of petty thefts. As an adult, he graduated to more serious offences, a string of arrests for shoplifting, passing bad checks, and a conviction for assault after a bar fight. He had served 6 months in county jail, a period he later described to Brittany not as a punishment, but as an education. Brittany Wallace was not merely a passive girlfriend. She was an enabler and an active participant. Where Caleb was the fire, she was the oxygen. She was drawn to his volatile charisma, mistaking his anger for strength. She shared his sense of grievance, believing the world owed them a living. Their relationship was a toxic feedback loop. He provided the violent ideation. She provided the validation and the veneer of legitimacy. She was the one who could cry on cue, who could project a convincing image of a damsel in distress. For months, they had been perfecting a scam. They would stage a breakdown on a quiet road, and Brittany would flag down a helpful driver. While the Good Samaritan was distracted, Caleb would rifle through their car, grabbing a purse or a wallet. It was low risk, and it funded their life, mostly their growing drug habit. But the small scores were no longer enough. The thrill was fading. Caleb's resentment was curdling into something more sinister. He started talking about a bigger score. He started talking about not leaving witnesses. He purchased a handgun, a cheap, untraceable pistol, from another resident in their apartment complex. He told Brittany it was for protection. She knew what it was for, and she did nothing to stop him. She was his partner. On March 14th, they were low on cash, and their rent was due. The pressure was mounting. They drove out to County Road 41, a place they had scouted before. It was perfect, dark, isolated, no houses for miles, poor cell service. They were not just looking for a wallet anymore. They were hunting. The timeline of that night is a brutal, heart-stopping convergence. At 8:47 p.m., Rob Henderson's Dashcam shows his F-150 cruising at a steady 55 miles per hour. The country music playing on his radio is audible, a gentle, lulling sound. At 8:49 p.m., the blinking hazard lights of Caleb and Brittany's sedan appear in the distance. Rob's truck begins to slow. You can see him lean forward slightly, peering through the windshield. He was a man who had been raised to help. His own father had once been stranded for hours with a broken fan belt, and the story of the stranger who stopped to give him a ride into town was a piece of Henderson family lore. It was a parable about the goodness of people. At 8:50 p.m., Rob pulls his truck onto the shoulder, about 15 feet behind the disabled vehicle. The powerful headlights of the F-150 illuminate the scene in stark detail. Brittany Wallace walks towards his truck, her face a mask of practiced anxiety. She is a talented actress in this theatre of cruelty. Rob rolls down his passenger side window. The dashcam, positioned in the center of the windshield, captures the audio with chilling clarity. Evening. Rob's voice is calm, friendly. Everything all right? Oh, thank God, Brittany says, her voice trembling slightly. Our car just died. My phone's dead, and my boyfriend, he can't get a signal on his. This was the first lie. Both of their phones were fully functional. They were simply turned off. Okay, well, let's see. Rob says. "What's it doing? Is it turning over at all?" "I don't know anything about cars," she says, a line designed to disarm and elicit sympathy. He's the one who knows, but he says he thinks it's the battery. "Right," Rob says, and you can hear the sound of his seatbelt unbuckling. "Tell you what, I've got jumper cables. Let me pop the hood and we can take a look." This was the moment, the critical juncture. Rob Henderson, acting on a lifetime of good instincts and decent principles, was about to step out of the safety of his truck and into a meticulously laid trap. The dashcam video continues to record. Rob opens his door and the interior dome light clicks on. For a moment, you can see his face in the reflection of the rearview mirror. He looks tired, but determined. The driver's side door of the sedan opens. Caleb Thorne emerges from the shadows. He is taller than Rob, with a wiry, tense frame. He gives a small, appreciative wave. "Hey man, thanks for stopping. I really appreciate it." "No problem." Rob's voice is now slightly distant as he walks towards the front of his truck. "Happens to the best of us." The next 47 seconds are recorded only in audio. The dashcam's view is fixed on the empty driver's seat of the F-150 and the back of the stalled sedan. The sounds begin with the mundane. The pop of a hood latch, the rustle of clothing, muffled conversation about battery terminals. Then the tone shifts. "Just put your hands on the truck." Caleb's voice is no longer friendly. It is flat, cold, and menacing. There is a pause, a beat of stunned silence. "What? What is this?" Rob's voice is confused, not yet terrified. "Give me your wallet. Your phone," Caleb commands. "Hey, look, just take it. It's fine," Rob says, his voice rising with dawning comprehension. The sound of a wallet being tossed onto the gravel is distinct. "The keys. To the truck," Caleb demands. A jingle of keys. At this point, the robbery is complete. They have his money, his phone, his truck. By any logical measure, the encounter should be over. They could leave him on the side of the road and be gone in seconds. But this was never just about logic. It was about power. It was about rage. "Get on your knees," Caleb says. "Please," Rob's voice is now pleading. "Please, I have a family. I have kids." This was not a plea that would engender mercy. To a man like Caleb Thorne, the mention of family, of a life worth living, was not a reason for pity. It was an affirmation of everything he hated, everything he felt he had been denied. It was fuel. Then Brittany's voice cuts in, sharp and impatient. "Caleb, just do it. Let's go." A muffled sound, a grunt of effort, and then a single, sharp crack. It is not loud like a movie gunshot. It is a dry, percussive pop that cuts through the night air. It is followed by a heavy, soft thud. Silence. For a few seconds, the only sound is the idling engine of Rob Henderson's truck. Then, footsteps crunching on gravel, moving quickly. A car door slams. Another door slams. The engine of the green sedan roars to life, a sound that proves the battery was never dead. Tires squeal as the car pulls away, leaving Rob Henderson's empty truck, its headlights still shining, its engine still running, its dashcam still recording. The cover-up was as cold and methodical as the murder itself. Caleb and Brittany drove for 20 minutes, heading deeper into the rural county, before pulling off onto a dirt access road leading to a state forest. There, in the darkness, Caleb dragged Rob's body from their car and rolled it into a dense thicket of underbrush. They drove to a gas station and used Rob's credit card to fill their tank. The transaction, for $62.41, was captured by the station's security camera. It showed Caleb at the pump, his face calm, and Brittany inside buying 2 sodas and a bag of chips. They looked like any other couple on a late-night drive. They discarded Rob's phone in a dumpster behind a fast food restaurant. They divided the $312 from his wallet. They drove back to their apartment, parked their car, and went inside. They had committed a robbery and a murder, and their first act upon returning home was to turn on the television. The alarm was first raised by Clara Henderson. When Rob wasn't home by 10 p.m., she started to worry. It was unlike him. She called his cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. She called again and again. By 11 p.m., a cold dread had settled in her stomach. She called the sheriff's department. The initial response was procedural and dismissive. The dispatcher on duty was polite, but firm. Robert was a grown man. He was only a couple of hours late. Maybe he stopped for a drink with a co-worker. Maybe his phone died. They could not file a missing person report for at least 24 hours. "You don't understand," Clara pleaded. "This is not him. Something is wrong." Her desperation was met with bureaucratic apathy. It was a frustration that would become a recurring theme in the early stages of the investigation. She was a frantic wife, and they treated her as such rather than as the first and most important witness to a deviation from a man's unshakable routine. Clara did not sleep. She called hospitals. She called Rob's co-workers. At dawn, she and her brother began driving the route Rob would have taken home, a desperate, sickening pilgrimage. It was a county road deputy on routine patrol who found the F-150 at 6:15 a.m. the next morning. It was still parked on the shoulder of County Road 41, its engine cold, its battery dead. The driver's side door was slightly ajar. The scene was initially treated as a possible vehicle theft and abandonment. There were no immediate, obvious signs of foul play. A small pool of blood on the gravel was noted in the initial report, but its significance was not immediately grasped. It could have been from an animal. The truck was towed to the county impound lot. When Clara was notified that the truck had been found, her hope turned to ice. She rushed to the sheriff's department, demanding answers. Where was her husband? Why was his truck abandoned? She was the one who first mentioned the dashcam. "He has a camera," she told the lead detective, a man named Frank Miller. "It's always on. It records everything. The footage has to be on there." This was the first major turning point in the case. The truck was processed by a forensics team. They found the camera, but the SD card, the small memory chip that stored the recordings, was missing. This was a devastating blow. The prevailing theory among the detectives was now that Rob had likely been the victim of a carjacking, and the perpetrators had been smart enough to take the only evidence. The search for Rob Henderson became a search for a body, but Clara Henderson refused to accept that. She became the advocate. She was a quiet woman forced into the role of a warrior. She insisted that Rob was meticulous about his truck. She argued that a carjacker, in a moment of panic and adrenaline, might not have thought to look for a tiny SD card. "Look again," she implored Detective Miller. "Please, just tear the whole truck apart." Miller, a veteran detective nearing retirement, was moved by her conviction. He had seen too many grieving families, but there was a fierce certainty in Clara's eyes that he could not dismiss. He ordered a second, more thorough search of the F-150. 2 days later, a young deputy, frustrated and about to give up, ran his hand deep into the gap between the driver's seat and the center console. His fingers brushed against a small, thin piece of plastic. It was the SD card. It must have been ejected from the camera during the struggle, or dropped by the killer in his haste. It had fallen into the one place a cursory search would miss. The breakthrough had been made, not by a brilliant detective or a stroke of luck, but by a wife who refused to let her husband disappear without a fight. Detective Miller inserted the card into a reader in his office. He clicked on the last file. The video began to play. He watched the blinking lights, the woman on the road, the friendly conversation. And then he listened to those final 47 seconds. He listened to the demand. He listened to the plea. He listened to the gunshot. He listened to it once, then again, and a third time. The blood ran cold in his veins. He was no longer investigating a missing person. He was hunting a monster. The audio was the Rosetta Stone of the crime, but the investigation still faced a monumental task. They had the sounds of a murder, but they had no faces and no names. The first step was to analyze the visual portion of the footage. Though grainy and partially obscured, the initial frames provided crucial clues. They had a clear image of the make and model of the car, a 1998 Toyota Corolla, faded green. They also had a partial license plate number. An analyst was able to enhance the video, clarifying 3 letters and 2 numbers. Running a search through the DMV database for that partial plate on that specific model of car yielded over 200 results in the state of Ohio. It was a starting point, but a daunting one. The next piece of evidence was the credit card transaction. The $62 gas purchase was a beacon. Detectives obtained the security footage from the gas station. There they were, a man and a woman, matching the general descriptions from the Dashcam audio, acting nonchalantly just an hour after they had committed murder. The images were clear. Their faces were now known. These images were blasted to every law enforcement agency in the tri-state area. The search for Rob Henderson's body continued. Based on the direction the killer's car fled on the Dashcam, search teams focused on a 50-square-mile area of forest and farmland. It was a painstaking process, involving dozens of officers and volunteers on foot, on ATVs, and in the air. 3 days after Rob disappeared, a searcher noticed a patch of disturbed earth and broken branches just off an old logging road. Following the trail, they found him. The discovery of Rob's body was a somber confirmation of what the audio had already told them. It also provided a wealth of forensic evidence. The autopsy, performed by the county medical examiner, was clinical and brutal. The cause of death was a single gunshot wound to the back of the head, fired at close range. The bullet retrieved from his skull was a .380 caliber, matching the type of cheap handgun common in street-level crime. The medical examiner also noted defensive wounds on Rob's hands and forearms, evidence of a brief struggle before he was subdued. He had not gone down without a fight. The combination of the gas station footage and the bolo, be on the lookout, for the green Toyota yielded a hit within 24 hours. A patrol officer in a neighboring county spotted the car parked outside a rundown apartment complex. The license plate was a match. The names registered to the vehicle were Caleb Thorne and Brittany Wallace. A quick background check revealed their history. Caleb's assault conviction, the string of petty crimes. They fit the profile of predators who had escalated. A surveillance team was set up. For 12 hours, they watched the apartment. They saw Caleb leave to walk to a corner store. They saw Brittany take out the trash. They were living their life as if nothing had happened. The arrest was swift. A SWAT team, taking no chances, breached the door at dawn. Caleb and Brittany were taken into custody without incident. They seemed more surprised than anything else. The search of their apartment was a forensic goldmine. In a shoebox at the back of a closet, they found the murder weapon, a .380 pistol with 1 round missing from the magazine. Ballistics would later confirm it was the gun that killed Rob Henderson. In a laundry hamper, they found the clothes they were wearing in the gas station security footage. And in a kitchen drawer, tucked away beneath takeout menus, they found Rob Henderson's wallet. His driver's license, with his smiling picture, was still inside. The interrogation began with both suspects separated. They were confident, almost cocky. They stuck to a pre-arranged story. They claimed their car had been stolen a few days prior. They had not reported it because they were behind on their insurance payments. They claimed they had been home watching movies on the night of the murder. They denied ever being on County Road 41. Caleb was particularly arrogant. He leaned back in his chair, smirking at Detective Miller. He treated the questions as an annoyance. Brittany was a better performer. She feigned tears and confusion, portraying herself as a victim of harassment. For 2 hours, they held to their lies. They were convinced it was their word against a dead man's. They had no idea about the dashcam. They had no idea about the SD card they had dropped. Detective Miller let them talk. He let them build their cage of lies, bar by bar. Then he decided it was time. He started with Brittany. He placed a laptop on the table in front of her and pressed play. The video started. She saw the road. She saw her own car. Her face paled. Then came the audio, her own voice, feigning distress. Rob's kind, helpful response. She began to tremble. Then came Caleb's cold command, Rob's plea for his life, her own voice, sharp and cruel. Caleb, just do it. Let's go. The gunshot echoed in the small interrogation room. Brittany Wallace broke. A guttural sob escaped her lips. Her carefully constructed facade shattered into a million pieces. The lies stopped. The truth, ugly and horrific, came pouring out in a torrent of self-serving confessions. She blamed Caleb. She said he forced her. She said she was scared of him. But she admitted they were there. She admitted to the robbery. She admitted he shot him. Miller then went to Caleb's room. He did not play the audio for him. He simply said, Brittany told us everything. Caleb's smirk vanished. He demanded a lawyer. But it was too late. The trap had been sprung. The trial of Caleb Thorne and Brittany Wallace began 6 months later. It was the most high-profile case the county had seen in decades. The courtroom was packed every day with media, with curious locals, and with the stoic, grieving family of Rob Henderson. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Maria Flores, built its case brick by evidentiary brick. They presented the gas station footage. They presented the ballistics report matching the gun to the bullet. They presented the discovery of Rob's wallet in the killer's apartment. But the centerpiece of the trial, the witness that could not be cross-examined or intimidated, was the dashcam recording. Flores had the courtroom fall silent. She played the 47 seconds of audio. The sound filled the room. Rob's confused voice, Caleb's brutal commands, Rob's final, desperate plea for his family, Brittany's goading, and the final, sickening crack of the gunshot. A wave of audible gasps and sobs swept through the gallery. Jurors wept openly. Clara Henderson sat motionless, her eyes fixed on Caleb Thorne, her face a portrait of unbearable loss. Caleb remained impassive, staring straight ahead. He showed no remorse, no flicker of emotion. He was a void. Brittany Wallace had taken a plea deal. In exchange for testifying against Caleb, she would plead guilty to second-degree murder, avoiding the death penalty. On the stand, she was a pathetic figure. She recounted the events of that night, painting herself as a reluctant participant terrified of Caleb. But on cross-examination, Flores forced her to admit her role. "You waved down Mr. Henderson's truck, did you not?" Flores asked. "Yes," Brittany whispered. "You lied to him about your car being broken, correct?" "Yes." "And when Robert Henderson was on his knees, begging for his life, you did not say, 'Caleb, stop.' You did not say, 'Let him go.' You said, 'Caleb, just do it. Let's go.' Is that not what you said, Miss Wallace?" Brittany could only nod, tears streaming down her face. They were not tears for Rob Henderson. They were tears for herself. Caleb Thorne's defense attorney had an impossible task. He argued that the shooting was not premeditated. He claimed it was a robbery that went wrong, that Caleb panicked. He tried to portray Caleb as a product of a difficult life, a man failed by society. It was a pathetic and insulting defense. It crumbled under the weight of the evidence and the chilling finality of the audio recording. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. The verdict was read in a hushed courtroom. Guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, armed robbery, kidnapping. Clara Henderson closed her eyes, and a single tear traced a path down her cheek. It was not a moment of joy, but of bitter, final resolution. Justice had been served, but it would not bring her husband back. It would not give Emily and Sophie their father back. Caleb Thorne was sentenced to death. As he was led from the courtroom, he turned and smirked at Rob Henderson's family. It was his final, pathetic act of defiance. Brittany Wallace was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. She would be an old woman before she ever tasted freedom again, a small comfort to the family whose lives she helped destroy. The story does not end with the verdicts. The case of Rob Henderson left a deep and lasting scar on the community. It exposed a systemic failure. Caleb Thorne was not an unknown quantity. His escalating pattern of criminal behavior was a matter of public record. He was repeatedly caught, processed, and given sentences that did nothing to deter or rehabilitate him. He was treated as a low-level offender, a problem for the county jail, not a budding sociopath. Each lenient sentence was a missed opportunity, another step on the path that ended on County Road 41. The human cost is immeasurable. Clara Henderson sold the house she and Rob had built together. The memories were too heavy, the silence in his workshop too profound. She moved to be closer to her parents, focusing all her energy on raising her 2 daughters alone. Emily and Sophie Henderson's childhood ended on March 14th. They were forced to navigate their teenage years without the guidance and unconditional love of their father. They live with a fear and a cynicism that no child should ever have to bear. Their father was murdered because he was a good man. What lesson are they supposed to take from that? This case serves as a dark and cautionary tale. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about the world we live in. Goodness can be seen as weakness. Kindness can be mistaken for an opportunity. The act of helping a stranger, one of humanity's oldest and most noble impulses, now carries a risk that must be calculated. This is not to say that we should all stop helping one another. That would be the final victory for men like Caleb Thorne. But it is a call for a new kind of awareness. A call to trust that nagging feeling in your gut. If you find yourself in that situation, on a dark road with a stranger in need, your first call should not be to your toolbox. It should be to the police. Let them be the first responders. Stay in your locked car. Be a good witness, not a victim. It is a sad commentary on our times, but it is a necessary one. The world is not as safe as it once was, or perhaps it was never as safe as we imagined. Predators have always existed, but now they have perfected their camouflage. They mimic distress. They weaponize our best instincts against us. Pay attention to that. Remember Robert Henderson, a good man who saw someone in trouble and did what he thought was right. His legacy is not his death. His legacy is the love he gave his family and the life he lived with integrity. But the circumstances of his murder are a warning, an echo from a dark roadside, reminding us that the most dangerous monsters are the ones who look like they need your help.